welcome again for the last session of the first day at the entertainment stage. It's my honor to moderate the next session, which is about film production 2030. My name is Peter Effenberg. I'm head of conference, but in the same time, for more than 20 years now, a production manager. So I'm very happy that we can talk about film production 2030. Please welcome to the stage Daniel Saltzwedel, Philip Klausing, and Charlie Woebcken. I would like to introduce the speakers a bit more. Daniel is a funding advisor of Medium Board, Berlin-Brandenburg, and he is a specialist for new media funding and funding of film and high-end series. I think Babylon Berlin is also something you fund. Or you. That means Daniel was a partner at Docs Consulting with Lieselot Verbrugge and Peter Jäger, advising international documentary productions and working as a trainer and strategist. And previous stations include content development, working as a documentary expert, and positioned as a producer and manager. And you are teaching financing and dramaturgy at the Film University.
A little bit,
okay. That was about you. We have a clip which is telling a bit more about Medium Board, and maybe Arnim, you can run this right now.
Zu Asche, zu Staub, dem Licht geraubt, doch noch nicht jetzt. Wunder warten bis zuletzt.
I absolutely loved being in Berlin. It was absolutely beautiful.
I love the mystery of Berlin.
I'm very fascinated by this city. It's really interesting to see how the city's evolved.
Willkommen in Berlin.
Können, war schon sehr besonders, weil man diese Orte kennt und weil ja das, was wir in der Serie erzählen, nämlich dass Berlin einzigartig ist, was die Partyszene angeht. Das ist einfach so.
The fact that we get to shoot here and capture all of that is exciting.
Berlin has such an extraordinary history that it does become almost the lead character.
Geschichte begegnet einem Berlin an jeder Ecke.
Berlin, die coolste Stadt Deutschlands, hat man auch die coolsten Drehorte. Schöner geht's.
Berlin hat 1000 Gesichter und Berlin kann alles sein, jedes Genre. Man kann unglaubliche Atmosphären kreieren.
Das sind die besten Leute und du hast in Berlin wirklich tolle Locations.
Brandenburg ist der Knaller.
Ich finde ja zum Beispiel, Brandenburg ist das schönste Bundesland Deutschlands. Berlin-Brandenburg bietet alles, was man nur braucht.
Berlin is a place in my mind.
Such a vibrant city. It featured performance, it featured character.
Berlin ist immer im Wandel und noch nicht auserzählt.
Wow.
Well, thanks to these guys mainly.
But you are the funder. I'm very happy to my left to have Philip Klausing here, who was just flying in from Hong Kong, which is not the safest city at the moment, I think.
Oh, yeah. Depends on where you are, but
yeah,
interesting time.
But you made it. Thank you so much. Philip is a line producer and production manager based in Berlin. He's specialized in project development, co-production, company setup, budgeting, financing strategies, multi-country splits, cash flow planning, and revenue waterfall models. So the whole range of production in a way.
Yeah, whatever is connected to money, I guess.
Your filmography includes Dark, which you are currently working on, right? You're Wanted is on your list, the VOD series directed by Matthias Schweighöfer. Homeland, you were the unit production manager at that time. Inglourious Basterds, also produced here.
It's a while ago, yes.
It's a while ago. And also The Bourne Ultimatum, which is also a while ago, but that's a great list of productions. Thank you very much for being here. And last but not least, Charlie Woebcken, the CEO of Studio Babelsberg, still the world's oldest large-scale studio complex and Europe's, I think, biggest studio still, right?
I would say Germany.
Germany, okay.
Things are growing so fast around us.
Okay. Charlie's also the managing director of Studio Babelsberg Motion Pictures and Babelsberg Film. And there's a long list of things you did. Inglourious Basterds is also there. Ghostwriter, Anonymous, Monuments Man, Bridge of Spies, Charlie's Angels, Homeland as well. I mean, you own a company which is more than 100 years of filmmaking, and to put all these great services you are offering in just one trailer is a bit hard, but you prepared also a piece for us, and we want to show this one. Please run the clip for Studio Babelsberg.
Exciting and really fun. I was there for months and months. I have fabulous crews. You've got a long history of cinema making expertise and experience here.
We love Berlin. We shot 4 movies here.
The Berlin public was in my movie, and the Berlin crew made my movie.
There's a great energy. There's a great vibe to the place. The most fantastic studio thing I've ever been in.
Great locations, an unbelievable crew.
It's really, really easy to shoot here because it's so flexible. And obviously the crews here are top notch. They're the best in the world because so many things have shot here. There's such a great tradition of movie making here. So ein geschichtsträchtiges Studio. Ich meine, wie viele Filme hat man gesehen, die dort entstanden sind?
Well, the first time I saw the sets in Babelsberg, the thing that came to mind is, damn, they're big. I mean, they are undoubtedly my favorite set that I've ever built.
crews here in Germany, great understanding of cinema.
It was such a special group of people making this film.
More exciting than the Hollywood studios.
Take me back there. I love the place.
Wow. Last year, Annabelle Gaillet, a speaker of MediaTech conference, said, Babelsberg is Hollywood before Hollywood. So I think it's true. Charlie, there's so much tradition in there, and you're part of that. But especially in the last years, what changed in your point of view when you look into film production?
When you take a look at the last 10 years, I think we were in the middle of digitization of our industry. What we saw in the show before had the roots already 15 years ago. I remember when Steven Spielberg and Peter Jackson did Tintin. They had a studio in Marina del Rey in Los Angeles where Steven Spielberg did some motion capture recordings, and he had a visual camera with a tableau. And he was in a video call with Peter Jackson in Wellington about how to direct the camera. That was all real time, a video signal, almost real time. I think there was a 1 second time delay. What we see today is more advanced with computer technology and the corresponding software, but we have had a very exciting process. I remember when Anonymous, Roland's Emmerich movie about Shakespeare not being Shakespeare was shot here in 2009. He used the first Alexa cameras. I think they were D20 prototypes, but they were already called Alexa. And he shot with very little light, candlelight scenes and stuff like that. And it turned out that the resolution was higher than on an analog camera. That was a real breakthrough in the filmmaking world, and I think as a result, the Alexa really picked up all over the world very fast then. So that was an exciting process also with all the labs going away, working processes becoming digital. I think it's even accelerating now with the production volume going up, but it was a very exciting time period for the whole filmmaking history.
So there was a lot of things changing in the meaning of being digital and a lot of tech around. What is about time? What changed there? I mean, I remember when we prepared feature films in the past, we had a prep time of about 1.5 years, 2 years.
Yeah.
What changed there?
Yeah, I remember 15 years ago when we started here, you normally you filmed a movie and then the director took the post-production where he lived or where he did prep his next movie to London or Los Angeles. It was a serial process. Today it has, since time is so much of the essence and production cycles get shorter and shorter, more and more things have to happen simultaneously on a very condensed timeline. I think Philip is able to tell you much more about that, and we will probably come to that in a second.
Yeah, I mean, that's I think the key driving point for series productions for sure. Turnaround of seasons. The audience wants fresh content fast. Usually, people think that a year is at a limit of an attention level of a series. So you need to produce, and post an entire season in that time frame. With that, you have to overlap in certain areas. The development phase goes into production phase goes into post.
This is something people watching these serial dramas at the moment, you are able to watch a full season if you want in a day. Yeah? I know it myself. You're just watching, 4 blocks, and then it's over, and you think, where's the next?
But they changed the model. They just changed the model. They just do it once a week, I think.
Yeah, they changed it back, in fact, as it was before. But in the same time, so you told me that there is between the last episode of a season and the next episode of a new season, there is a maximum 12 months, something like that, sometimes.
This is what they aim for. They usually, on bigger shows, they're not making.
But in the same time, the quality is much higher. It's going into cinema quality. So we're talking about 2K, we're talking about 4K, we're talking about a lot of grading, a lot of sound mixing. How can, especially you as a line producer, how are you dealing with that? I mean, it's 12 months. It's like for 8 hours of.
Yeah, I think the key element is to have good partners, reliable partners in the process, especially in post-production, because then time runs out and you need to deliver on that date. There's no exception usually. You agree to that date way before you go into production. So whatever you lose on the way, you have to catch it up in post. So the vendor is a key element, and the visual effects vendor for sure, and also sound services. So there's what we see right now is Charlie just mentioned it, a rise in production volume. So we have more shows coming to Germany, more shows being produced out of Germany, also for the international market. So we come to a point where we reach a saturation of crew availability. I think that's also something you're just experiencing right now. I'm producing here Dark, so we have our core team available. We don't have issues with that, but if you start a new show, that's a key driving factor. And in terms of the turnaround, what's also important is that you are flexible in how to set up the show and how to shoot it. So you can't block shoot anymore. You can't just go once to a location. So you need to, be able to juggle a little bit around. You need to have actors available, all the key elements available, that you can basically just keep on shooting.
So in the last couple of years, the market changed a lot. I mean, the people who are knocking on the door of Babelsberg are not anymore only the big studios from Hollywood, but also Netflix and other Sky. My question is, the change of business model, the change of market, what effect has that on production? Is there a direct link between the two things?
When we talk about what will be filmmaking like in 10 years from now, I think you have to differentiate between what will change in terms of production methods, which we just started to talk about how to prep a movie and how to administer it with software tools. Our business is basically a craftsmanship industry becoming a real industry now, driven very much by television production, because television production is much more under time and cost pressure than maybe a big tentpole movie. On the other hand, big tentpole movies are a huge playground for new technologies, which will probably also have an impact on how you make smaller movies in 10 years. Steven Spielberg, when he did Bridge of Spies here in Potsdam, we had a set visit from our chancellor at the Klinika Bridge, and she, in that little tent where before they started shooting, she came in and she asked him, the first question was, do you do a lot of rehearsals here in this movie? And then he started to explain and said, look, I'm making two kinds of movies. One are like this one, the independent movies, and the other ones are the big tentpole movies. And these are two worlds. On independent movies like this one, there's basically no rehearsals, no prep, because everything is improvised on location anyhow. And this is maybe also how typically the German filmmaker or European filmmaker with smaller budgets would approach a movie. And then he said, and secondly, and on these independent movies, I do like up to 20 rehearsals. They don't do rehearsals, but I have to take up to 20 takes for a shot in order to find then the magical scene in the cutting room later. And then I do the other big tentpole movies, like we saw here before on Lion King and The Mandalorian. On these movies, there's a lot of rehearsals because the freedom of actors is small compared to independent movies. There are certain paths that you have to follow. The way you move and you act has to be really rehearsed a lot. And these movies are very expensive They need a lot of prep time because you cannot catch up. If you make a mistake in prep, it's almost important to catch up that time-wise and money-wise in the back end. So you have to very well prepare a movie. And on these movies, I normally need only, that was Stephen saying that, only 4 takes because everything is so well prepped. And these are the 2 words. I think a lot of innovation will come from these big movies because smaller budgets cannot afford these technologies, but eventually they will become cheaper and also will be introduced in regular movies, in regular filmmaking. I also think that on this step becoming a real industry, the assisting software behind the processes, the working processes, will improve and will become more integrated. You know about that because we have this DWARF project, which is assisted by the Ministry of Economy, which is basically trying to find out how good can you use metadata in systems to really help you become even more efficient in a movie making process.
Yeah. Danny, I want to bring you in. Changing markets, changing production. How is Medium Board reacting to all this? I mean, you are mainly a funder, but is there something where you try to focus on to attract production companies or studios to change their way of production in a way through money?
Well, we're in the fortunate position that people come to Berlin, people want to work here, that Berlin is a popular shooting location. So we're kind of like gifted in that sense. We like to protect that and use that and see that in 10 years' time that's still the case. So that's our base premise, obviously. Then we have a fantastic industry around here, and we're also used to, and we like to see the international aspect. If that's one take home for me from our discussion here, or for our perspective in the future also, is to keep the international aspect and to grow it. I think that's something that becomes our industry, but also that works in terms of what we do, which is ultimately we like to see also the region, and particularly Berlin, but also the other region of Brandenburg, to see that in the films reflected. So that's something that we also like to keep. So changing markets and changing rules, I think it's fascinating to see how production is speeding up. That you know, in some parts of a series you're still working on it, and others is going up. You know, we would have said in the old days on air already. So that's a huge pressure, I think. So I think that will change a lot, and I think technology will help you manage all that. But by and large, you have to think that film funding in Germany is coming out of a wholly different paradigm, which was for there to be German filmmaking and foremost artistic filmmaking. So our whole regulation back catalog comes out of that. That's basically our DNA. That's the European model for there to be public money for us to have European or German or whatever films. And I think that's a wonderful tradition, and we like to see that stay, but also it's quite clear that the industry is shifting, and that the viewing patterns are shifting. So we wouldn't be the first people to go on and lead the way, because I think that's for the industry to tell us what they would like. But I think we're already seeing many changes. We're starting to support series projects. There's the old paradigm of that the producer in Germany would need to have some part in some position in the rights, so to own part of the product or the IP, so to speak. And I think that's going to be an interesting challenge to see how that evolves in the coming years. I think this German cinema, stop me if I'm going too far. I think the German cinema is clearly under pressure. I think that's something we also see in Europe. That's something that if that is a trend that continues away from the cinema I think will still be there, but maybe in a different form or in different status in their entire sharing of audience attention. We would still want to see that. I think there we would also need to see more digital innovation also. I think cinemas would need to know, in terms of analytics or algorithms, much more clearly who, you know, not just what could be my audience, but what is my audience. I think that will help them greatly. And yes, I think we will continue also to protect a certain form of I wouldn't say identitarian filmmaking, but European filmmaking in the sense that we like to see and be successful in artistic ways or in the festivals.
I really would like to talk about the audiences a bit later, but coming back to that point. But Philip, when you look to the future, what is necessary in the meaning of meeting the time pressure, still having good crews, setting up good workflows? What is needed to meet that challenge?
I think what we need is, or what we have now in certain areas, is good technology which helps the human being act faster, not replace that human being. We just saw it in that reel, which was fantastic because you could see a camera operator, DOP, probably 60, 75 years old. You cannot adapt him to virtual reality, so he has still his little head and his motion. He reenacts emotion on a dolly, so that is a real thing. He can haptic is a big thing. He can use that in a studio environment, and is being transported into a digital image. And a fully CG image here. So I think that was this is a kind of technology which we need. Because we still work with filmmakers who are different ages, coming from different cultural backgrounds, working for different audiences. So I think in the end, it should stay for a while a human product made by humans.
We had this morning that wonderful speech from Nick Kemp and Mark Harrison. They were researching the question how people are working collaboratively and also in the cloud. And they were presenting different use cases from the Disney studios down to a small digital agency. And what I learned there was just one factor. First, all what we do in the meaning of that workflows is more business. But secondly, it's, as you said, it's about the human being. People have to change. Are we still in the middle of when I'm not talking about this VFX possibilities or what is possible, what Christoph Roth was just saying, okay, that's technology which is there. But what is about the workflow technologies which are even very simple and not being used at the moment? For instance, information you are collecting in the preparation of a film and are lost then later on when you are going to the editing, or the question if you do script continuity on paper or not. What is your experience with that? What is the experience with teams which are freelancers, younger people, older people, very experienced people? What has to change there?
I think education of what's available is a key element. Sometimes I have.
But how you do that with freelancers?
It's not. I can't do that. I have no time to do that. Really, that's what I mean. It needs to happen from somebody else. So you need to offer courses or something to bring your software to the market in the end. Yes, there's fragmented market. There's script continuity who needs a system to upload the daily timesheets. You could have time cards digitalized. You could have all different kinds of in the process little apps and software solutions to help you make the process a little bit more faster. But key element is, are people adapting it? There's so much new stuff on it that you just rely to your old Excel sheet in the end.
But we had a conversation the other day, and I found it fascinating that you say by the new market and the demand that is there, and the time pressure, the paradigm of being under time pressure, leads you back to shooting more analog sometimes, or trying to keep everything at one location. Could you just expand on that?
Not analog and shooting on film. It's also coming up. It's posh. People love film. But it's more the analog solution is usually the faster and the easiest to translate solution. So
for an explosion or
just do it all in camera. It's easy. You have it. You wrap. It's there. You could see it on playback. It's kind of what you expect. Sometimes it also depends on the director. If he's comfortable in giving everybody the feeling, okay, we have everything. It's all good. But if he doesn't know and people try to just feed stuff into him, you end up shooting more and more and more. So that's why I said it's we sometimes just go back and do it all in camera, because then we know we have it And it's also, you don't shift it into post where you just run out of time. So I think what we see right now is post is highly digitalized. Production is still pretty analog in terms of how you do things. And
that's actually interesting, because I've heard that many times, that our industry is actually very conservative in adopting new working technologies. You might think that it is different because we are doing all these fantastic things on screen, but the working habits are very conservative. And this is maybe also one of the reasons why in our industry there is no integrated SAP solution yet for running all the processes in a movie.
Maybe
the cloud, I think. You know, this morning, when I also heard that this morning about cloud computing and using the cloud for certain things, we also use the cloud with Microsoft for our rendering and our volumetric studio, for example. The good thing about the cloud is that it forces you to rely on one data bank, which is in the cloud. You know, if right now we have all kinds of island solutions in a film production, like you said, one has Excel, the other one PowerPoint, or I don't know, all kinds of little tiny software solution, and it's all the data which is created in these little software solutions is not integrated into each other, into one solution, which might help you to speed up in processes, to find bottlenecks, because bottlenecks are very important to really not lose time in a film production. And these tools don't really exist yet, but I think with the cloud it will come eventually. It is basically a tool at the end, and people have to adapt. They have to learn how to use these tools, but at the end, if it is helpful, I think everybody will do that.
Yeah. You said also that the time pressure is bringing you in the situation that you need shooting conditions which are more replicable and more reliable. Is that also a reason for instance, using a backlot as you have it, or a studio more than original places for shooting?
I try to always depends on the budget in the end, because there's if you have to replicate a scene, it's always more expensive than just to go out on the street and just shoot it there. But what we are looking for is always a studio kind of setup. Could be an abandoned warehouse. I just look whenever I read a script, I try to find something which is generic, which you can combine, so that you have some plates which you own, which you can always go back to, react on changes, so that you're not standing still. But if you have the opportunity to shoot it in the studio, it's always good. Because a studio setup, you have it all here on the lot. There are no permissions needed. You can, prep. Starting the day and wrapping the day is way faster. So you win shooting time. You can stagger shooting crews over each other. So one is shooting in one stage, the other one is in another stage. It just makes it way more efficient. Yeah.
And also, it has become more and more expensive to shoot on location in Berlin, and so if you have replicable possibilities in a studio or on a backlot, that can also help you save money.
Yeah, but it should always be driven by the story in the end, because if you try to force a story out of its natural environment, it's always you can feel it, and that's why if it's in the script, if there are interiors in it, it's always good to just go in a studio.
Yeah.
I mean, Berlin has always been very film friendly, but I remember when you did Homeland and you replicated Baghdad in the center of Berlin, that was really a lot of work for the police.
We tried to digitalize the permission process with the authorities here. It didn't work out, but they helped. They were pretty helpful.
Daniel, there is a lot of criticism around the corner. People say in Germany there are too many films produced, too many films which are coming into the cinema, forced to come to the cinema because of the funding. And most of them are not having the audiences they wish to have, right? In the morning, we learned from Katie Bremme from France TV, which was speaking about artificial intelligence, that there is, of course, a possibility to collect more information through artificial intelligence about what the audiences want. You, as a funding body, not you personally, but the Medium Board as a funding body, has to do decisions on what to fund, what not, what has maybe the option to be successful or not.
I'm
And
so
it's also
curious
the
where this
question
is
of
leading
culture
to.
and not. So the question is for me, or the question for you is that something you are taking in mind, that these kind of informations would maybe in the future a basis for your decision of which films you might fund or not?
That might be a hot dream of some people to replace us all in the jury structures, jury tradition by algorithms. Whether that's a happy outcome or not, we would have to see. I mean, what's going to be production like in 10 years? Actually, we don't really know, but we're taking a wild guess. I did a lot of work in documentary, and it's been quite popular there for some years already to do something like analytics on your audiences, because a lot of documentaries have some issue or some topic that you could relate to, and therefore reach out to certain people who might be interested in a certain disease or something. And I do find that whole idea very, very. I mean, I'm astonished. This is online marketing actually, and it's been done by all industries. And maybe we're too conservative there to use that more proactively and not just leave it to the big players. But as a funder, I would be hesitant. But would I like to see our cinemas, our distributors, maybe even our producers, to have available more, at a fair use price, more access to data analytics on their audiences and on the likelihood of their successes? Yes, of course. I think that's something we should invest in.
And artificial intelligence relies a lot on logic first, but also on pattern recognition. And for example, if you want to value a script and see if it meets, the typical parameters that you need to be a successful movie afterwards, you can compare these parameters with like 100 or 2,000 movies in a database and try to find a signal, comparisons. And when you have that, you might have the right valuation for that parameter in order to make it successful. And I think that is work in process, because databases and comparisons are growing all over the world. In medicine, for example, pattern recognition with neuronal networks is an important thing. And I think that will eventually, when these tools are customary standard, also be used in our industry.
Philip, Netflix and all these other platforms have a lot of information about their audiences. They are not sharing it.
No, sure.
Of course not. But when you work as a line producer, when you work for, let's say, a classical studio or for a platform, has that any impact to you as a line producer, because they are dealing differently in the beginning by saying, okay, this is what the audience want because we know that?
Yeah, if the studio always comes from a filmmaking background, big feature film, so they rely on that experience. The streaming platforms are more tech-driven. They rely on patterns. They compare everything to everything, and they're always questioning, whatever your outcome is, what certain things cost to what their experience was in the past. So they are collecting a lot of data. But I think I would like to come back to that point of the audience. I think everybody's always looking for the holy grail of how to hit the widest audience. I think it comes from a business model of distributors being, big, doing advertising, having big overheads, they need to generate a lot of money. What we see right now in what the next 10 years will be, what we see already now is that the market is totally fracturized. We have fragments everywhere, and the audience is not as big anymore. So I think there's still cinema, but it's just not as big anymore. So the question is not how to generate more viewership, it's more to look at your own business model and how to make that a little bit more efficient so that you don't need to generate these big numbers, that a German movie doesn't need to make 1 million admissions, that it's okay to go home with 100,000. And how can we achieve that? And it goes all the way through exploitation. We need to question basically everything.
Yeah.
And this is what we see right now. And you see that especially in the volume of products coming up. We have different formats. It's difficult to say if it's a high-class drama. Is it just TV? Is it cinema? Is it a comedy, 5-minute sitcom? Is it a web clip? There's so many definitions. Nobody really knows, how to define the product. But there's always an audience for it.
Yeah.
And I do think that digitization, we should be happy for it, because maybe some changes would have happened anyway. And now we have these wonderful new tools and wonderful new demand there to buffer some of the things that might have gone anyway. Because at the fund, you're in a privileged position to see quite a lot of trends coming to you, and we do see that the more popular cinema productions have a market and do work, maybe in a different scale, but do work. And that the more courageous artistic works seem to have a work, but we also have a long tradition of films that are somewhere in between, and there is a clear worry that might be a section that we're gonna see quite some changes, and just in terms of our criteria, how we evaluate, are still more or less the same than they've been, at least in my knowledge, for quite a while. But the urgency of some of these criteria has changed totally. Yeah. Where does a film actually reach an audience is not a question that we can just say, yeah, blah, blah. No, it's becoming a real important question. We don't know the answer. I think each project will have its own answer. And that's how we, I think, go step by step on these changes that are coming towards us.
Are there any questions in the audience for the... Okay, thank you so much for... are there any questions to the people here?
Do step up and contradict us. I do think we are in a climate of opportunity very much. I don't want to be coming across as marketing, but I do think it is exciting times. Yeah. I mean, we do seriously. Well, I certainly don't know what's going to be in 10 years.
Yeah. But this is exactly what I mean with not always looking for the same successes as there were in the past. You also need to question that. Yeah. It's really a success, and what's your budget to make it a success also.
It will become more fragmented and more target-driven. A target-driven story and a target-driven genre and so on.
But you will also have the big tentpoles even carrying more budget because they want to. It's just the studio just says we just do 2 a year, but these ones need to be really good. So.
I mean, a movie theater is a point to multi-point entertainment at the same time, like broadcasting. When you watch a movie, a video on demand, it's unicasting or it's peer-to-peer entertainment, and that will change. I think also the marketing will change when you go more like into targeting certain audience groups with Instagram and other social networks instead of using, a billboard.
Yeah. There is now one question. We will finish after that, but this question we will take.
Hi, my name is Dan. I have a question regarding the war on talent that is going on, or of talent, where everybody's competing for the best talent behind the camera. How do you see that proceeding into the future? And what is mostly important for that?
Yeah, that is something we discuss quite a lot right now, because the industry has picked up so much in production volume with the streaming services. I think the production volume has almost doubled within a year or two, and it will stay like that, or maybe even increase with new streaming platforms coming up. And this is a people business industry. 80% of the value added is salaries, is people of a budget when you go through all the services that you have to consider. And talent has to grow with the industry. Right now, there's a real shortage. Everybody wants to have the most experienced line producers and cameramen, and there are rumors that Netflix is already hiring the good people independent of a project to make sure that they have access to talent. This is really crazy what's happening right now. Yeah. We're also discussing with film schools and the university how we can improve that process to also give young people who come from the university to get a chance as fast as possible, because the need is so high. But it's a real challenge.
But the good news is that we are in Babelsberg not having a large studio and a great funder and great stuff, but also a film university, an IT university. And I think that should bring us and big production companies, I think that should bring us very fast forward to save talents which are coming up, which are using tech or maybe differently as we did it in the last decades.
But a lot of crews that's been needed at the moment is below university level, and
That's
I think
right.
that's a big issue we need to urgently address. We used to have the Fachhochschule, the Polytechnic, or whatever you call it, the applied university.
Yeah.
That's, I think, the English term. And I think we need more of those jobs.
You cannot
I think it's
study
wonderful.
assistant director. You can study director, but you cannot study assistant director. And there are a lot of assistant directors.
Yeah, they're just even in courses. You also need to have a trainee program because it's a lot of stuff needs to be picked up on the job. But this is a really big point, because no matter how good your talent is, your director or your screenwriter or your cast member, you need somebody to put light on it because the audience immediately reacts on it there, and you need good people there.
Yeah.
You need good assistant directors to make your shooting schedule. There's I think we have good talent in Germany, but it's so hard to really have also good crew and stay focused on the product to make it good. That's a big task for the future.
A lot to do still. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for this discussion. Please thank everyone, Charlie, Daniel, and Philip.